Hello, I'm Aber. Welcome to my room. Feel free to get comfortable because today you get to listen to me rant about the diabolical story of Flipped. So Flipped is a book turned movie directed by Rob Reiner, who directed classics like When Harry Met Sally, Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, so you know this is gonna be a banger. I wanna be very clear that the title of this video is not an exaggeration. The story is diabolical. I am unfortunately obsessed with it, and I have been since I was a kid. This story, filmed specifically, has gone triple platinum with the woman in my family. I feel it truly cannot begin to understand the cultural impact that this film had on us, that Bryce had on us. It's basically a rite of passage for the teenage girls in my family to have a crush on Bryce. To this day, my sister's contact in our cousin's phone is Briella, as in Bryce and Kyella. There was a point of time where I watched this movie literally every night. I've logged this film a grand total of 12 times in the 2 years I've had a Letterboxd account, and that's not even accurate because there were definitely days where I watched it 3 or more times and did not log all of them because I didn't want to expose myself to all of the cool people who follow me on Letterboxd. Alright, when the film went to DVD, my grandmother bought like 10 copies and distributed it amongst us. And I did actually use this copy to take notes for this video. With an overwhelming love for the movie came an obvious interest in its source material, so my sister got a copy of the book by Wendelin Van Dran, and when she was done reading it, I read it. And I also, like I just showed, still have this copy. As you can see, it's busted. I had to tape it up earlier because it was falling apart while I was taking notes. Film actually follows pretty closely to the book, other than some pretty minor but kind of random changes. The only real change being the time period in which it takes place. The novel takes place from 1994 to 2000. And the film takes place from 1957 to 1963. In an interview with American Libraries, Reiner explains that this decision was made because, one, this was around the time he was having these sort of first crush moments. He was their age around this time, and so he really wanted to capture that feeling. And then two, so they could portray the story without things like the internet, cell phones, social media, things like that. Other changes, like I said, are pretty minor, mostly name changes. Other than that, a lot of the film's lines are actually taken directly from the novel, and the path of events is pretty much like exactly the same. Because of the way my brain works, if something happens in the book that didn't make it into the movie, I just kind of take it as like stuff that did happen but off screen. So I'll kind of be talking about the book and film as if they are one. I'll try my best to clarify what happens in one versus the other, but I might slip up. So basically, if you've only consumed one of the two pieces of media and don't remember something that I'm saying, just assume it happened in the other. And of course, if something plays out completely different from the book, I will explain both scenes separately. Another thing of note is that the whole concept of this story is that it flips back and forth between the two main characters' points of views. So a lot of the experience is the same interactions and events being told twice through different lenses. The story follows neighbors Bryce and Julie Baker as they go through their preteen years. And let's just get into it because I have a lot I want to say. The movie starts the same as the book, with Bryce saying,
"All I ever wanted was for Julie Baker to leave me alone."
The Loskeys are moving into a new home the summer before 2nd grade, and this home happens to be right across the street from the Baker household, where Julie is sitting waiting at the curb. While Bryce and his father unpack the moving truck, Julie runs in, uninvited, unannounced, immediately offers help. Bryce immediately finds her strange and annoying, and so does her father. Mr. Losky subtly tries to get her to leave, but according to Bryce, this girl cannot take a hint of any kind. Bryce's father comes up with a ditch plan and tells Bryce to go inside to help Mr. Losky and his older sister Lynetta. Bryce, wanting away from Julie, runs out of the truck, but Julie follows him, reaches out to grab him when suddenly the strangest thing happens. In the commotion, the two end up holding hands, which freaks Bryce out. Then his mom comes out, sees them, and says, "Well, I see you've met my son." So Bryce does the only manly thing available at the age of 7 and runs behind his mommy. In the movie, it cuts off here, but in the book, Mrs. Losky tells Bryce to go give Julie a tour, but Bryce locks himself in the bathroom, and Lynetta starts messing with him until Julie leaves. The next few years of his life are filled with social discomfort and strategic avoidance. When Julie sees him at the start of 2nd grade, she immediately tackles him and brands him for life. She chases him around on the playground, and other students say things like, Bryce and Julie sitting in a tree, and hey Bryce, why don't you marry her? Typical 2nd grader shit, right? It gets so annoying to Bryce that he and his diabolical friend Garrett, played by Josh from To All the Boys,
Then she asked you to leave, buddy.
hatch a plan. Bryce asks out Sherry Stalls. To fully understand the brilliance of this plan, you have to understand Julie had always hated Sherry Stalls. Of course, Bryce couldn't understand why. Basically, the entire idea is that Julie sees them together and backs off, but it's so obvious that Julie lives rent-free in Bryce's head just as much as he lives in hers. All right. It's also pretty clear that Bryce does not care about Sherry at all. Whenever they're together, all that boy is thinking about is Julie. And if she sees them together, he doesn't hold her hand unless Julie is around. He doesn't actively engage in conversation unless Julie is around. And he is always looking around for her. About a week into their dating, Garrett decides that he also has feelings for Sherry and tells her everything. She breaks up with him at recess and slaps his face by the water fountain. Julie, of course, sees this all go down, which means it was only a matter of time before she started up with the goo-goo eyes again. But this time, oh my god, I'm sick. Oh my god, this time she starts sniffing him. That's right, sniffing him. She was sat behind him and would literally bend over her desk and inhale deeply.
Thought the sniffing hair was weird. I had to sniff his hair in one scene.
From the book I wish they'd kept in the movie was during these sniffing sessions, she was also helping Bryce cheat on spelling quizzes by whispering the answers into his ear. His only hope was that next year they would be in junior high, and with the bigger school and different classes, maybe he'll never have to see her again, and it would finally be over.
The first day I met Bryce Losky, I flipped.
Oh my god, they said the thing! That is the title of this chapter and also the title of the book, so crazy. It was something about his eyes, his apparently dazzling eyes. We see their initial meeting from her perspective, and she genuinely believes that when her and Bryce were holding hands that he was about to lean in and give her her first kiss.
This be my first kiss?
But got shy when his mom came out and caught them.
He had feelings for me, but he was just too shy to show them.
She spends the next few years trying to give him plenty of opportunities to get over his shyness. When Bryce starts dating Sherry, she assumes that Sherry is holding him in her evil clutches because, according to Julie,
Sherry Stalls was nothing but a whiny, gossipy, backstabbing flirt.
who was all hair and no substance. But Julie has full faith in Bryce to see through that shallow conniver. And when she sees the slap, she assumes that Bryce broke up with Sherry and that was her reaction to it.
They broke up at recess. She didn't take it well.
In the book, Sherry actually goes and tries to fight Julie after she finds out about Bryce's whole plan to use Sherry to get rid of Julie. Julie wins this fight, obviously.
Oh, I got money from that bitch!
And after the breakup, Bryce starts being way more friendly with Julie.
Now that Bryce was out of Sherry's evil clutches, he started being nicer to me.
Hi, Julie.
Hi, Bryce.
And she starts up with the sniffing. She says it's because his hair smells like watermelon. And in the book, she also says that she's studying his ear fluff. Ew! I'm really glad they cut that out of the script for the film, because what the hell? I don't know. She's also delusional as hell because she says she spent the year secretly sniffing watermelon and wondering if she was ever gonna get that kiss. Mind you, this is what she is doing. Girl. Anyway, let's get back to Megaflop Bryce. In 7th grade, Bryce's maternal grandfather, Chet Duncan, moves in with the Loskys. Bryce finds him kind of odd. Chet is very quiet and mysterious to Bryce, and all he really does is sit around and stare across the street, which happens to be where the Bakers live. Mrs. Losky explains to Bryce that he stares like that because he misses his wife, Renee. But this wasn't ever something that Chet wanted to talk to Bryce about. He never really talked to Bryce about much of anything. That is until Julie Baker ended up on the front cover of the Mayfield Times. Now, why did Julie end up in the newspaper? Is it A, being an 8th grade Einstein, B, stalking Bryce, or C, refusing to climb out of a sycamore tree? Julie Baker and that fuck-ass sycamore tree is what I imagine Bryce to say if this took place now, but instead we get the wonderful line,
Julie Baker and that stupid sycamore tree.
Basically, there's this giant sycamore in their neighborhood near the school's bus stop, and ever since they were kids, Julie loved to climb that hoe. She would always invite Bryce to go climbing with her, but that was exactly what he needed, to climb up a tree with Julie Baker. He'd be dragged right back to the 2nd grade. Bryce and Julie sitting in a tree.
Why didn't you just make me eat lima beans for the rest of my life?
Julie does this thing where she'll announce how many blocks away the bus is from the tree, and this annoys Bryce big time. One day she comes down from the tree and Bryce insults the tree, and the way he looks at her, you can obviously tell he wants her. Look at his face. Okay. Insert image here. Actually, no, this is actually what this scene is from. Okay, she's looking at him cute, but literally as she walks off this screen, he I'll play the clip, but he wants her. That's all I have to say. He wants her. And after he insults the tree, Julie calls him visually challenged, which is crazy. And of course, this comment bothers him big time. Visually challenged. Visually challenged. This coming from the girl whose house was the laughingstock of the neighborhood. Mr. Losky hates that the Bakers don't take care of their yard, and hates that Mr. Baker, who is a painter, he hates that he paints. In the book, Mr. Losky hates this so much that he makes Bryce mow and do what to the yard? Anyway, Julie's yard sucks, and that's why Bryce hates that sycamore tree or something like that. I don't know. The tree isn't even on her property, but he correlates them in his head. And as annoying as the yard was to Mr. Losky, it was nothing compared to how annoying Julie Baker was in that tree. Bryce and Garrett are walking up to the bus stop and see a work truck and a handful of workers holding chainsaws yelling up at the tree. They arrive at the stop, and one of the men says,
Either you come down or we're gonna cut you down.
Either you come down or we're gonna cut you down, all right? Julie claps back, go ahead, cut me down. I'm not coming down. I'm never coming down. Then she starts crying and begging everyone to come up there so they can't cut it down. She starts singling out Bryce. The bus pulls up and Bryce feels bad. I mean, Julie was frantic, but he wasn't about to skip school over it. So he gets on the bus and thinks about Julie for the rest of the day because she doesn't come to school. There's a scene that only happens in the book that I find really important and really wish it happened in the movie because I just find it super telling. Let me find it. Okay, so it says, when the bus dropped us off that afternoon, Julie was gone, and so was half the tree. The top branches, the place my kite had been stuck, her favorite perch, they were all gone. We watched them work for a little while, the chainsaws gunning full throttle, smoking as they chewed through the wood. The tree looked lopsided and naked, and after watching for a few minutes, I had to get out of there. It was like watching someone dismember a body, and for the first time in ages, I felt like crying over a stupid tree that I hated. I went home and tried to shake it off, but I kept wondering, should I have gone up there with her? Would that have done any good? I thought about calling Julie and telling her I was sorry they'd cut it down, but I didn't want to. It would have been too, I don't know, weird. And as much as I prefer the movie over the book, I think they made a mistake not including this scene, and it goes to show what I've always known is that Bryce always liked Julie but was too embarrassed about it because of the way everyone else speaks about her and her family. He literally knows where her favorite spot in the tree is and feels sick watching it like getting cut down. Like, he obviously cares a lot about this girl and he just is too immature to admit it. After the tree incident, Bryce's grandfather calls him into the sitting room and asks him about Julie.
That girl has an iron backbone.
And Bryce gets to shit talking. He calls her a stalker, says that she's pushy beyond belief, and makes it very clear that he does not consider him and Julie to be friends. Chet says, well, a girl like that doesn't live next door to everyone. And Bryce's ass says,
Lucky them.
Chet gives Bryce the newspaper to read, but Bryce stuffs it in one of his drawers because, like he needed to know anything more about Julie Baker. Julie, of course, stops going to the bus stop. She's still going to school, but she's not really there. She doesn't raise her hand. Her eyes are red. She's not as confrontational as she usually is. He finds out she's been riding her bike to school, and this bothers him even more because it's a long way to their school. And he even catches himself looking for her every morning at the bus stop. Okay. One day it rains and he still doesn't take the bus, which bothers him so much that he almost goes out and asks her to keep taking the bus, but he doesn't want her to think that he misses her. That was the last thing he needed. Do you see what I mean when I say this story is diabolical? Julie loved to watch her father paint. Or really, she loved to listen to him talk while he painted. Mr. Baker works as a mason, so while he's on his long drives, he'll take pictures of the landscapes and he'll bring them back to recreate in his paintings. And Julie likes to join him outside when he does. She learns a lot about him from these talks, about his first job, about his education, and one day, out of nowhere, he asks, "What's going on between you and Bryce Lasky?" And Julie's like, "What are you talking about?" And he's just like, "Oh, well, you talk about him all the time."
I do.
She was like, "Oh, maybe it's his eyes or his smile."
What about him?
This question confuses Julie.
What?
And instead of telling her what he means, he talks in riddles and says, "A painting is more than the sum of its parts. And
You have to look at the whole landscape.
it's all about proper lighting." Julie doesn't know what this means, and she's also a little offended that he would say something like that about Bryce, but she leaves it alone because that's supposed to be a peaceful time for them. Then, one day, while she's in the tree, she begins to understand. Kind of. You see, it's a view that she sees when she goes to rescue a kite that, luckily for her, belongs to Bryce. The kite is lodged in a spot that is just way higher than she's ever been before. And as she went up, the prettier the view got and the sweeter the breeze smelled, yada, yada, yada. The whole being greater than the sum of its parts thing, yada, yada, yada. Julie gets it now, yada, yada, yada. And that is her favorite spot now. This is the spot that Bryce had memorized. She starts going late to watch the sunset and arrives early to watch the sunrise. One day she's there for her sunrise. She hears a noise below and hears the workers come to cut the tree down. She gets into the argument that we saw from Bryce's perspective, and after the bus leaves, more and more people come, but she still doesn't move until her father shows up and talks the fireman into letting him climb up the ladder to talk to her. She must have cried for 2 weeks straight. She still went to school, but all she can think about is her tree. One night, while Julie is holed up in her room, her father comes in with something covered by a towel, and he asks if she's okay. She tells him that she's fine, it was just a tree, but he tells her that he never wants to forget how she felt when she was up in that tree, and gives her a painting of it that he painted himself, and everyone cried and cheered and stood and clapped, standing ovation. Chills. It's honestly very genuine and thoughtful, and obviously Julie really loves it. And this whole situation kind of shifts Julie's perspective on the world and the way that it works. Now, this next chapter is where the diabolicalness really turns up a notch, all right? So Bryce has a fear of eggs, chickens, and snakes. I know, dude has a lot going on. It started with the eggs and the snakes. So Julie has these two older brothers called Matt and Mark, and they are in a band with this boy that his older sister Lynetta has a crush on. He only comes up once in the book, so he doesn't really matter. His name's Skylar, but he's literally never mentioned again. In the movie, the snake is Skylar's, but in the book, it belongs to the Baker brothers. In both, Bryce is at one of their practices with Lynetta, and they stop practicing to watch the snake eat. Unbeknownst to Bryce, the snake's diet consists of whole raw eggs. And he could have gone his entire life without seeing a snake unhinge its jaw and swallow a huge egg in its entirety, crushing it by slithering back and forth the way snakes do. It's genuinely unsettling, and I understand Bryce completely when he starts having nightmares about being trapped in an egg about to get swallowed whole by a snake. It's frightening stuff, really. Then, the real nightmare started. Julie starts bringing over her own eggs to the Laskys. The year prior, Julie hatched 6 eggs for a science fair, and Bryce has a funny line. I mean, Here I had a live-action erupting volcano, and all anyone cared about was Julie's boring chicks breaking out of their boring shells. He's so silly. He says, I was never one to dwell, but that didn't mean I had to eat her lousy eggs in the same breath. Okay, Bryce. Sure you're not one to dwell. All right. The Loskis have a conversation about whether or not it's possible that there could be chicks in the eggs. They tell Bryce to ask Julie if they have a rooster, but he does not want to do all that. Then Lynetta starts accusing him of being afraid of her. BRAWK, 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 BRAWK. So he enlists Garrett, who is an apparent expert on chickens. They sneak around Julie's house and peek into her backyard to see if there's a rooster. And Garrett says, there's no rooster. They're all chickens.
Is that a chicken?
He says chickens. Okay? He says it's because roosters have rubbery red stuff and that rooster strut, and none of these chickens strut or have rubbery red stuff. So that is how he concludes that these are all chickens and none of them are roosters. That's what he says. I want to make that clear. That's what he says. Bryce relays this information to his family, pretending that he went over to talk to Julie, and his dad is side-eyeing both Bryce and Julie and clocks Bryce. Of course they're all chickens. A rooster is a chicken. The question is there a rooster or are they all hens? Hens? Who said anything about hens? And it was at that moment Bryce knew. Garrett didn't know jack shit about chickens, okay? But he does end up confirming that roosters strut and that they're all hens. But he doesn't care. He's still not eating them. Why not, Bryce? Because have you seen their yard? It's disgusting and covered in chicken turds. This turns into a conversation about the possibility of these eggs having salmonella, and the family ends up telling Bryce to give the eggs back. He definitely does not want to do this, so instead of returning the eggs and telling the truth, he tosses them in the trash. Okay? This only temporarily solves his problem because Julie comes back a week later with another batch of eggs that he tosses again, springing Bryce into a life filled with lies, intrigue, and deception. He would wake up every day and keep a lookout for her so he could take the eggs before anyone else knew she was there. And he wondered, why couldn't he just say no to Julie? Was he really afraid of hurting her feelings, or was he just afraid of her? This is where it switches back to Julie's point of view in the film. In the book, a few things happen differently. For starters, Mr. Losky is the one that defends the eggs at first. In the movie, Chet does. Lynetta gets upset with Bryce and storms away during the initial discussion about the eggs, leaving him alone with Chet and his father. His father tells him to ask Julie about the eggs, and when Bryce refuses, Mr. Losky is actually the one to accuse him to be afraid of Julie, not Lynetta, and tasks him specifically with asking her. During the second family discussion, Bryce tells the truth about spying over Julie's fence with Garrett, and his father is pissed. He calls him a coward and says it would be one thing if he were in love with Julie, but he shouldn't be afraid of someone he finds this annoying. That's an interesting thing to say. Why would he say that? Why would he even bring up the possibility of Bryce being in love with Julie? It's just something to think about. Why would he be afraid if he weren't in love with her? Instead of telling Bryce to return the eggs, Mr. Losky is the one who tells him to toss the eggs, but to never back down from Julie again. So that's kind of what happens in the book. In the movie, it's a little different, but yeah. In the film, it does not specify how long Bryce is tossing the eggs, but in the book, it's confirmed that he did this for 2 years. 2 whole fucking years. Oh my god. We also get the day Julie finds out about this from Bryce's perspective before it switches back to Julie in the film, and I think they actually did a good thing cutting Bryce's POV where it did. So I'm not going to share Bryce's POV until the moment we hear Julie's side, because oh my god, book Bryce is such a little shit. I can't even begin to describe it. Okay? I'm shaking. Dude, you will see when I'm fucking recording this shit tomorrow, like, how bad Bryce's behavior really is, because
wait, that's him, like,
the movie tones him down so much.
That's him toned down?
Yes.
Oh my god.
Back to you. Never thought of growing. You had a few, 'cause I always do.
gonna miss TikTok, you guys.
Can you tell that I recorded this in January and am just now finishing editing in March? At the end of March, it's March 31st right now. And actually, low-key, this joke is still relevant because allegedly TikTok is getting banned again in 9 days. If I recorded it now, the trend, instead of the crawling back to you trend, it would be the I got a feeling you had everything you wanted one. And it would be the exact same characters, just with the edit, because, hello? That's what's trending right now.
So before we get to the film, I want to talk about the beginning of this book chapter because this specific part of the plot was completely cut from the film. So in the book, the Bakers have a dog called Champ. Champ actually passes away around the same time the sycamore tree gets cut down, and at the same time she finds out about the eggs. In the first paragraph, she actually says that she was having a harder time coming to terms with the eggs than Champ's death because Champ was old and she knew his time was coming. That is how badly this egg situation affected her, and oh my god, I'm sick. I'm sick. Ugh.
Yo, you're sick to my stomach, fam.
They've had the dog since Julie was 6, and Mr. Baker pulled up in a truck with a fully grown dog who was abandoned on the side of the road and hit by a car. They weren't supposed to keep him, but eventually he just was there for so long that he became their dog. Mrs. Baker starts noticing an odor around the house, and she ends up figuring out that it's Champ pissing all over her carpets. And I can relate to that. Okay, I can relate to having a dog piss all over my fucking carpet, all right? It's not fun, and I understand her anger. This incident leads to Julie's brothers, Matt and Mark, naming their band Mystery Pisser. Because that's what she calls him. She calls him the Mystery Pisser. Champ was their only pet until Julie had her chickens. Now, this is when the film and the book get back on the same track. This chapter of the film opens with Julie and her parents looking at the embryos of the eggs through the, it's like through a tube with a flashlight attached to it. She explains that when her teacher first suggested the project that she wasn't really into it. She didn't think she could do it. But the teacher basically forces it onto Julie and gives her the eggs and everything. So, now Julie feels obligated to do it. When she sees the little baby chickens, she's locked in. After the fair, her parents agree to let her raise the chickens, and eventually they start laying eggs. The Bakers have an insane excess of eggs, and after about a month, their neighbors, Mrs. Stubbe and Mrs. Helms, offer to start buying them by the dozen. Julie Baker decides that Mrs. Losky also deserves some eggs. She says it wouldn't feel right charging her because of how often Mrs. Losky helps out Mrs. Baker. Plus, if she gets the chance to see Bryce, that wouldn't be the end of the world. Now, let's talk about the morning Julie catches Bryce. It was, like I mentioned earlier, just a few weeks after the sycamore tree got cut down and Champ's death, and Julie hadn't been keeping up with her hens because of her sadness. Book Bryce actually mentions noticing this in his point of view. That morning when he's taking the eggs from her, he asks if she's gonna start taking the bus again. Oh, so you missed her and you're obsessed with her.
Could it be that Bryce Losky actually misses me?
He tells her that they cleared away her stump and that it doesn't look that bad anymore, and they kind of stand awkwardly for a few seconds before Bryce tells her bye and closes the door. Julie stays on his porch for a while and thinks about how he literally just told her that he misses her and is obsessed with her. And a moment later, Bryce comes out holding a brown paper bag full of trash with the carton of eggs sitting right on top. So this is where the book and the film diverge, and I figured this is where I should bring up something that bugs me big time in the books. Bryce is actually awful in the book, to the point where I can't even imagine the actor who plays Bryce as, Bryce in the book.
Liz, do you feel comfortable talking about what you're feeling?
I'm pissed! You will see just how hard the writers worked to make Bryce more likable in the film in just a second. Let's start with how this plays out in the film, okay? He's surprised when he sees Julie and tries to keep the bag out of view. She offers to help him take out the trash, and when she sees the eggs, she obviously says, "Are those my eggs?" He tries to lie and tell her that he dropped them, but she can see that none of them are broken, and so she asks why he tossed them. Bryce, after some questioning from Julie, tells her that his family didn't think it was worth the risk of getting salmonella because her yard is a mess. Julie gets upset, taking the eggs from him and informing him that the neighbors pay for her eggs. Bryce seems guilty and tries to apologize and tells her that they didn't want to hurt her feelings, but she does not buy this and runs off. Believe it or not, this is the good version of this scene. Now let's rewind and see how the bad version plays out. This is like the evil timeline of flipped. So in the movie, the thing that she brings the eggs in is like an open box, but in the book, she brings them in actual cartons that close. So like she could not see the eggs when he came out. So when she sees the carton sitting on the trash, she's like, oh, what happened? Did they break? And Bryce is like, yeah, they broke. That's what happened. Yeah. But she still takes the carton and opens it and sees all the eggs sitting perfectly in the carton. She asks him why he was tossing them. And this time, instead of just standing there cowering, he literally walks to the trash can while she is trying to talk to him, asking him this question. And when she follows behind him for the answer, he turns around, and this is how the conversation plays out. He shook the garbage out, then turned to face me. Does the word salmonella mean anything to you? Salmonella, but my mom doesn't think it's worth the risk. I followed him to the back porch. Are you saying she won't eat them because she's afraid of being poisoned? Poisoned? Why? Because your backyard is like covered in turds. I mean, just look at your place, Julie. He pointed out our house and said, just look at it. It's a complete dive. It's not. I cried, but the truth was sitting right across the street, impossible to deny. Have you always thrown them away? He shrugged and looked down. Julie, we didn't want to hurt your feelings. My feelings? Do you realize Mrs. Stubbe and Mrs. Helms pay me for my eggs? You're kidding. No, they pay me $2 a dozen. No way. It's true. All of those eggs I gave you, I could have sold to Mrs. Stubbe or Mrs. Helms. Oh, he said and looked away. Then he eyed me and said, well, why did you just give them to us? I was trying to be neighborly. He held me by my shoulders and looked me right in the eye. Mrs. Stubbe is your neighbor, isn't she? So's Mrs. Helms, right? Why be neighborly to us and not them? What was he trying to say? Was it still so obvious how I felt for him? And if he knew, how could he have been so heartless just throwing away my eggs like that, week after week, year after year? I'm sorry, Julie, he whispered. And that's how the scene ends. Do you see what I mean when I say this story is diabolical? Like, oh my fucking God. I remember reading this book for the first time and being so shocked and confused. And y'all, it gets worse. Earlier in this book, when we get the scene from his perspective, the author purposely doesn't show us the entire thing. But in his little internal monologue, he says, I told her we were afraid of getting salmonella poisoning because her yard was a mess, and that we were just trying to spare her feelings. I told it to her like we were right and she was wrong, but I felt like a jerk. Oh, really, Bryce? He also doesn't mention the fact that he asked Julie if she would start taking the bus again. He calls her the egg chick in his head and compares being honest with her to tackling the tiger. Seriously, reading Bryce's point of view of the situation and then reading what actually happened is emotional whiplash. Ultimately, I am glad the writers of this film changed the scene completely because it just makes Bryce look even worse than he already did. And honestly, if I had read the book before I watched the movie, I probably would have hated it and not bothered to watch the film. That is how poorly Bryce behaves in the book. Jesus Christ, do they PR the fuck out of him in the film. I am so sick of this boy, but unfortunately, we do have to return to his point of view. One day, Bryce sees Julie working in her yard, and it doesn't take long for him to realize that he traded his old problems with Julie Baker for a whole set of new ones. It was actually worse having her ignore him than having her stalk him, in his opinion. Because he likes her. One thing about Julie Baker, she knows how to hold a grudge. Just like me. The entire week, Bryce tries to approach her at school, but she always manages to find a way to duck him. And there's this really funny clip of him, like, sitting down next to her at the lunch table, and she just gets up and walks away immediately, doesn't even look at him, doesn't say a word to him, just leaves. And he looks so defeated. It's hilarious. Bryce says it bothers him because it was a consistent reminder that he had been a jerk. Okay, but again, I think it's because he capital L likes her, okay? And he just can't stand her not being around him. So Julie continues ignoring Bryce and working on her yard like the queen she is. And Bryce continues to watch from his window like the stalker he thinks Julie is. Then one day, when Bryce is on his way home from bowling with Garrett, things got weird. His grandfather, who Bryce had never seen outside of his robe and house slippers, was out in work boots and gardening gloves helping Julie with the yard work. What's that all about? He gets super pissy about this and keeps peeping on them from his window. And he's upset because Chet had already said more to Julie in the day than he said to Bryce in the entire time they'd been living together. Plus, Bryce was pretty sure he'd never seen his grandpa laugh. I used to think it was kind of weird of Bryce to be pissed, but now that I'm older, it is kind of crazy that Chet doesn't try to like get to know his grandson at all. At some point, this is only mentioned in the book, I believe, Chet actually sees Bryce lurking and waves at him, which inspires Bryce to leave through his back fence and walk for the rest of the afternoon. And then when Chet gets home from that day, him and Bryce have a conversation about the eggs, and he tells Bryce, one's character is set at an early age. I would hate to see you swim so far out you can't come back. Basically, he says that it's better to be honest in the beginning than to cause greater pain down the line. Later on, Bryce catches Julie alone in the yard while Chet is out, and he approaches her, compliments her yard work, which I want to talk about real quick because look how good they did. Insane. Slay to both Chet and Julie. Can we do a clap? Snaps around the room. He apologizes to her for the eggs, and when she asks him why he didn't just tell her that they didn't want them, all he has to say is, I don't know, it was dumb, I shouldn't have, and I shouldn't have said anything about your yard either. It was out of line. All right, clock your own tea again, Bryce. Again, it's like he almost gets it, but isn't getting it at the same time. I don't understand. Julie tells him that maybe it's for the better because of how much the yard has improved and how much Chet has taught her. Chet even tells Julie that she reminds him of his late wife, Renee, which is really sweet, but I have to giggle because Julie says he meant it in a nice way, as if there's a mean way to mean something like that. I don't know. In the book, Bryce goes quiet and starts staring at Julie, trying to find similarities between her and his grandmother. And he stares too long, and Julie starts to get uncomfortable. And when she verbalizes it, he just wishes her luck on the yard and leaves. So I want to give a quick warning here. This next scene uses the R slur pretty heavily, partially as a medical term because this takes place back in the day when it was the term that people use for people with special needs. But this scene also has very ableist rhetoric coming from Mr. Losky that I will not be repeating because I don't find it necessary. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the scene because it does matter to the plot. Later that night, when the Loskys are all together, Mr. Losky decides to confront Chet about helping Julie out when he could be spending time with Bryce. And Bryce actually tries to defend him, repeating what Julie told him about how she reminds him of his grandmother. Mr. Losky brushes it off like it's silly. For whatever reason, Mr. Losky is insanely bothered by the Bakers. He calls them trash and insults their home and integrity, just really nasty things about people who have literally been nothing but kind to him and have never done him wrong in any way. And so Chet explains to Mr. Baker that they do not own the house and haven't been able to upkeep their home because they are financially responsible for Mr. Baker's younger brother, Daniel, who has special needs. Mr. Losky then proceeds to crack some disgusting jokes that no one laughs at because they're not funny. And I'm not going to repeat exactly what he said, but he essentially insinuates that whatever Daniel is diagnosed with runs in the Baker family. Chet clocks him and explains that when Daniel was born, he had the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck. And he says this line, if he would have gotten enough oxygen, he would have been a perfectly healthy baby boy, just like your son. And after that line, Mrs. Losky is suddenly hysterical. She runs into the other room and Mr. Losky follows her. Lynetta isn't there in the movie, but in the book, she also leaves and calls their family a joke. Bryce just kind of sits there stunned and Chet looks very guilty. Bryce asks why his mother is so upset and Chet explains to Bryce that his mother could have been in the same situation because Bryce also had the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck, but the doctors were able to get it untangled in time. And this information sends Bryce spiraling. He and Chet go on a walk to clear the mind, but Bryce's mind is not clear. He starts asking what Mr. Lasky would have done with him and suggests that he would have just thrown him into an institution without a second thought and basically pretended he never existed. Chet tells Bryce that it isn't fair to judge Mr. Lasky based on something that he hasn't done, but I can and will judge him based on the things he has done. He's a piece of shit, and Bryce is starting to realize this too. Chet thanks Bryce for mentioning the whole Julie reminding him of Renee thing, and Bryce tells him that he went to apologize to Julie, and Chet is just absolutely giddy because he's trying to set them up. Like, this entire movie, Chet is trying to set these two up, all right?
And there she was, holding hands with Bryce. My Bryce!
Eventually, they get to the construction site where Julie's true used to be, and Chet says it must have been a spectacular view. Then says the tree's gone, but she still has that spark it gave her.
Some of us get dipped in flat, some in satin, some in gloss.
But every once in a while, you find someone who's iridescent. And once you do, nothing will ever compare. Chet, you would love Mr. Baker because you both love to talk in riddles.
I cast the dookie spell on you with limerick and tale and riddle and rhyme.
Bryce does not understand what this means, and we get this gold line from his inner monologue. Flat, glossy, iridescent. What the hell did any of that mean? Julie Baker had always seemed plain dusty to me. Until now. He only uses the word dusty in the book, but it's still crazy work.
Also, look at this look at this trailer I found for this film while I was editing, where Dante Bosco is recording like it's not Bryce. It's a recording of Dante Bosco saying something that isn't from the book. I don't know where this audio came from, who made this trailer, but it is Dante Bosco's voice.
When I first moved into the neighborhood, I felt like I was gonna lose my lunch.
This is particularly interesting to me because all the songs playing in the trailer are in the movie, and other than it being Dante Bosco, it looks like a normal trailer for the movie. It's Dante Bosco. Why? I don't understand.
And that was just the beginning.
So while he's thinking about this, he goes to grab the newspaper that Chet gave him and actually takes the time to read the article. He thinks it's stupid up until it gets to the parts where they directly quote Julie. She says things like, to be held above the earth and brushed by the wind, and it's like your heart has been kissed by beauty. He's surprised at how much it affects him and how she could even string together a sentence that profound at their age. And he continues rereading her parts and wonders when she started thinking about the world the way she does. He also pays very close attention to the picture of Julie in the article, specifically the one that zoomed in on her up in the tree. He says, okay, this is a direct quote from the book, I'd spent so many years avoiding Julie Baker that I'd never really looked at her, and now, all of a sudden, I couldn't stop. He tries to stop and tell himself to get a grip, but he finds himself reaching for the paper over and over again. Alright, let's get this from Julie's perspective. So before the whole egg situation, Julie had never felt embarrassed by where she lived before. She knew that it wasn't pretty by any means, but she never really thought of it as a problem. At dinner time, after her brothers sing a cover of What's Your Name by Don and Juan, Julie brings up fixing the yard. She mentions it casually, calling it a project and even offering to pay for it with her egg money. And here is where Mr. Baker tells her that it's the landlord's responsibility to take care of the yard. And Julie finds out that they don't actually own the house. He says that Julie isn't the person that should have to clean out the yard. Julie replies to this by saying, but we live here and it looks so bad. Mr. Baker can tell that something has bothered her, and Julie tells them what happened with the Loskys tossing her eggs and why they were tossing her eggs. This launches into an argument between Mr. and Mrs. Baker that I can unfortunately recite by heart, but I won't, to spare you. The gist of the argument is that Mrs. Baker is tired of having to barely scrape by, and now that it's affecting the kids, they should consider government care for Daniel. Mr. Baker gives her a firm no, and in the heat of the conversation, she says, "He's more important than your own children." This causes Mr. Baker to crash out. He slams his fist on the table. He yells and asks her how dare she ask something like that. This causes Julie to yell over tears, like begging them to stop arguing. This scene is interesting in comparison to the book because it happens basically the same way, but Mrs. Baker never says he's more important than your own children. Also, I have to giggle because Matt and Mark aren't in this scene in the book. They are added into the scene just for them to sing that cover, and it literally never cuts back to them. Like, not even a reaction to, like, the parents fighting, to Julie, like, crying, like, none of that. It does not cut back to them once after they sing, except, like, for one line. But literally, other than that, you forget that they're there. It's so weird. Like, why even add them to the scene if they're just gonna contribute like one thing, you know what I mean? After the fight, her parents came into her room and talked to her separately to apologize and explain. Mr. Baker explains that his brother means a lot to him and that he promised his parents that he'd always take care of him, and Mrs. Baker tells her that the reason she fell for her father was because of his strength and his kind heart. These conversations motivate Julie further to start working on the yard. She tries to tell herself that she doesn't care what Bryce thinks and is only doing it so the house looks presentable, but we both know that's not true. On her first day of yard work, she struggles a bit and nearly gives up, but my queen powers through it because she's stubborn as hell. And the next day, while she's pruning some bushes, Chet approaches her offering his help. She tells him that if he's only there because of what happened with the eggs, that she doesn't want his help. Chet explains that he didn't know about the eggs and even clocks Bryce a little bit by saying he is handsome, but he has a long way to go. He tells her that he read the newspaper article about her and that she and his late wife have the same spirit, not like literally, but that they have the same zest for life or whatever. He even says that she would have sat up there in the tree with her, which is very sweet. Over the next few weeks, they worked together in the yard, and the entire time they worked, they talked. They talk about Renee and their adventures, and Chet even understood the whole being greater than the sum of its parts thing. And he tells Julie that the same can apply to people, which is what Mr. Baker was trying to hint at before. But with people, the whole can be less than the sum of its parts. She takes this to heart, and the next day at school, she studies her classmates, trying to figure out who is more or less than the sum of their parts. And she finds that most of the people she knows are less than the sum of their parts. But the only person she can seem to place is Bryce. Until recently, she would have said that he was far greater than the sum of his parts, but now she wasn't so sure. The next few scenes we only get in the book, but to me that just means it all happened off screen. So Julie is frustrated with herself for thinking about Bryce again and for low-key still having feelings for him, and she takes her frustration out on the yard. Chet notices and asks her what's going on, and she says that she's upset with herself, then asks how he fell for his wife. Chet deduces that she's having boy troubles, but she denies it. He tells a story about he came to fall for Renee, which is actually quite juicy and scandalous. Chet was engaged to another woman he discovered was less than the sum of her parts, and then he says about Bryce, mind you, get beyond his eyes and his smile and the sheen of his hair and look at what's really there. Dr. Seuss looking ass motherfucker, are you kidding me? She wonders if this is him trying to tell her that Bryce isn't worth it, and it just honestly gives her more to think about. Like, it does not help her at all. Later that day, her and her mom are having dinner, and her mother brings up that her and Mr. Baker don't feel comfortable with Chet coming around without them trying to compensate him in some way. Julie says that offering would only insult him, but they do it anyway. Of course he refuses, and he tells them that, you know, it's his pleasure to work with Julie, and he's really happy to be doing it. That day while they're working, Chet asks if she's fixing up the yard because the family is planning on selling the house, and this leads Julie to telling him about the landlord and Daniel and basically everything that's been going on her mind in the last few weeks. Later that day, Chet points out that Bryce has been like peeping on them from his bedroom window. And I am pretty sure that one of Chet's favorite pastimes is clocking his grandson's tea.
When the chow is tea, but the finna is gag.
Because he tells Julie he may be acting like a coward now, but I do hold out hope for that boy. So at this point, they have built and painted a white picket fence, cut back the hedges, and are now planting the seeds for the grass, essentially finishing up everything Julie needed help with. Chet leaves for the day, and a few minutes later, Bryce approaches her while she's watering the seeds. This is where he apologizes and also where the movie picks up. And as he's apologizing, she wonders about how genuine he's being, if he's only apologizing to make himself feel better, and then she thinks that maybe she just wanted him to be greater than the sum of his parts. But as she looked into his eyes, she was pretty sure Bryce Losky was less. The morning after the blow-up at Bryce's place, Mrs. Losky informs the family that she has planned a dinner party with the Bakers and that she expects everyone to attend. Mr. Losky's against it, but everyone seems down. He even says,
Just shoot me now.
In the book, Lynetta is also against it, but she's kind of awful in the book. So I'd choose to ignore it and focus on how slay she is in the film. Bryce is feeling shaken up because no one in his family besides Chet knows about the eggs, and he's afraid that the Bakers are going to bring it up. He gets ahead of it in a scene that we only get in the book by telling his mother about the situation and begging her not to tell his father. She agrees and thanks him for telling her. Knowing about the dinner makes it more awkward for Bryce to see Julie at school. He notices that she's back to avoiding him, but not in the same way as when she was mad. She'd say hi and stuff, but she isn't like constantly hanging around him like she used to. He even catches himself looking around for her and staring at her in class and being disappointed when she's not there. He can't even control it. One minute he's paying attention to the lecture, and the next he's completely tuned out, staring at Julie. He realizes that it's because when she's focused in class, she makes the same expression as she does in that photo in the article that he keeps reading. This shakes him, and he wonders if she's really that interested in the lecture. Dana Tressler, played by Stephanie Scott of Ant Farm and Girls Like Girls music video fame, catches him staring at class, and Bryce immediately tries to cover it up by saying there's a bee in Julie's hair. And he does this because he knows Dana likes to gossip, and if he doesn't, then it'll be all over the school by the end of the day. And of course, Dana doesn't buy this for a second. After school, he goes back to look at the newspaper in hopes that he's just imagining the similarities between Julie in class and Julie in the picture. But when he gets to the page, there she is, the girl from his math class, 2 rows over and 1 seat up, glowing through the ink. Oh my god! Flipped is literally the perfect title for this story. Him having their seating arrangements memorized is literally everything to me, and I'm so sad that this line didn't make it into the film. And it didn't make it into the film because the scene where Dana catches him is taking place in a science class, not a math class. And I have to point this out because it actually really bothers me. Julie is using a Bunsen burner and test tubes and has her hair literally like this, like over her shoulders, like her long hair, instead of tying it back in like a ponytail or a bun, which in my heart and soul, I know Julie Baker would actually do because she's a girl of science. And she knows not to have her hair down around a Bunsen burner. But again, him having their seating arrangements memorizes everything to me. And I'm deeply, deeply saddened that it didn't make it into the film. Okay, we get a funny sibling moment when Lynetta barges into his room while he's reading the paper. And he like immediately like closes his binder to try to cover it up. And she says, "What you got there, Dad's Playboy?" "What you got there, Dad's Playboy? What you got there, Dad's Playboy? What you got there, Dad's Playboy?" And I have to giggle every time I watch because the way that the actress delivers the line is so funny. In the commotion, Bryce forgets that the paper is in his binder, and the next morning, Garrett finds it. Bryce tries to backtrack, but Garrett's bitch ass is like, "I'm sure you've got a perfectly reasonable explanation for why you're carrying a picture of Julie Baker around with you." He only says it in the book, but still. And then Bryce insists that they talk about it later. So during library time, they sneak off because Julie and Dana are both in that class. And Bryce tells Garrett everything about the eggs and how he can't stop thinking about Julie.
You freaking mental, Julie Baker.
And Garrett tries to convince him that these feelings aren't real and that he just feels guilty about the whole egg thing. Bryce tells Garrett about Julie's uncle, and Garrett's little smarmy ass says,
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, my friend.
Basically making the same gross insinuation that Mr. Losky did. Bryce is so flabbergasted that he has the urge to deck Garrett in the middle of the library. I'm pissed! But decides against it, and instead of saying, hey, that was really wrong to say, you shouldn't have said that, that's very rude, he just laughs awkwardly and says, oh, right, and then walks away. You need to leave! Oh, that's not. Get out! Get the hell out! They have plans after school, but Bryce stands him up, upset that he crossed the same line Mr. Losky did. At this point of the book, he's still trying to deny his feelings for Julie, but in the movie, he ends his POV segment by saying, I didn't care what they thought.
I liked Julie Baker.
You guys, he likes Julie Baker. Literally what I've been saying this entire time. Like, he literally likes her. And he's finally admitting it. One Sunday morning, while Julie is watering the grass, her dad comes out holding like a brown gift bag, getting ready to go see Daniel for his birthday. Julie insists on going with him, and after some pushback, he eventually agrees. On the car ride there, they don't say much, but Julie doesn't mind, noting that silence connects them more than words ever could. They get to the facility and Julie meets Daniel. He doesn't recognize her at first, but is very nice when she introduces herself. He opens his gift from Mr. Baker, which is a puzzle and a pinwheel. He has a special interest in puzzles, and they're hung up all over his apartment. They go out to get ice cream during the visit, and while there, Daniel has a pretty intense behavior after dropping his ice cream. But this is all being played by an actor who, as far as I know, has no developmental delays like the character Daniel has. So I have a hard time calling this performance realistic. I do understand what the book and the film are trying to convey, and I know that neither director or author had any ill intentions writing the scene. I also know that it's important in the context of Julie's life and story, but I truly do not know what to make of the scene other than that it gives Julie more of a perspective on how difficult it can be for her Uncle Daniel to express his frustrations. So after the ice cream shop, they walk back to his apartment and they play with the pinwheel. When they get back, Mr. Baker helps him set the table to do his puzzle, and then they leave. On the ride home, Mr. Baker talks about how Daniel used to live with him and Mrs. Baker, but they weren't able to fulfill his needs in the same way his current facility does. Daniel really enjoys living there. They provide him with the care he needs, and he goes out to work a few days out of the week. They talk about what life was like growing up with Daniel and how he prefers to stay at the facility even when invited over for holidays. And Julie is just overall glad she got to visit him and got to know him a bit. When they get home, Mrs. Baker is nervously mopping the floor and tells them about the Loskys' dinner invitation. Both Julie and Mr. Baker are suspicious, and Mrs. Baker explains that Mrs. Losky had called her practically crying, insisting that they accept the invite, saying that they felt bad for not inviting them sooner and wanted to get to know them better. Julie feels uneasy about the whole thing, but agrees because she can see how much her mother is looking forward to it. The next week at school, she finds herself daydreaming, thinking a lot about her uncle, her grandparents, her sycamore tree. So earlier, when Bryce is wondering if she's really that focused on the lesson, she isn't, and I'm happy that we get to know that. She drifts through the days until Thursday, when Dana Tressler, the girl who caught Bryce staring at her, approaches during library time saying, "Bryce Losky likes you." Girlie hates to bury a lead. She tells Julie about how she caught Bryce staring at her and how he tried to play it off by saying it was a B. Like, is that the lamest cover up or what? The only B she's attracting is Bryce. I am telling you, that boy is lost in Loveland. They go over to eavesdrop on Garrett and Bryce's conversation. Surprise, surprise, she hears what they say about her and her uncle and is pissed, deciding then and there that she no longer liked Bryce Losky.
I no longer liked Bryce Losky.
Yeah.
Literally how the turntables, like, they literally flipped, you guys. Like, they did the thing. They did the thing. Knowing that Garrett and Mr. Losky have the same horrific sense of humor gives Bryce the serious willies, as he so graciously puts it. He's so off-put that he struggles to even look at his father, but he does agree that the dinner with the Bakers should have been a barbecue. Mrs. Losky is running around making preparations and stressing everyone out. She tells Bryce to go get ready, and this is around the point in the film specifically, not the book, all right, where Bryce starts giving off Avar energy. Okay. He goes through like all of his dress shirts trying to find the best one, and because this is a direct quote, I wanted to look good for Julie, but I didn't want her to think I wanted to look good for her. God, he is so unfortunately real. Oh. The book actually specifies that he spent 20 minutes trying to pick out an outfit and only decides on one when he sees the Bakers crossing the street. And I want to bring up something here that isn't important to the plot, but I want to talk about it anyway. There are so many little details in the book that are incorporated into the film. For example, the Bakers bring over some pies, and it's the same specific types of pies in the film as it is in the books. As I mentioned earlier, damn near half the characters have name changes in the transition. Sherry is called Shelly in the book. Dana is called Darla. Mark is called Mike. Daniel is called David. Later we meet a kid called Eddie who's named John in the book. They even changed Mr. Baker's name to Mr. Losky's name. And they changed Mr. Losky's name to Steven. Mr. Baker is called Robert in the book, and they change it to Richard.
What the fuck, Richard?
Which I'm pretty sure is Mr. Losky's name because they call him Rick in the book. I really don't get the need to change so many characters' names, but keep so many other things the same. And again, this doesn't affect the plot in any way. It's just something I find interesting. Just interesting. Like, I don't know. When they arrive, everyone goes in different directions. Lynetta takes off with the Baker brothers to go listen to one of their CDs. Mr. Baker and Chet go off to talk about perpetual motion. Mrs. Losky and Mrs. Baker go off into the kitchen, and this leaves Chet and Julie alone at the front entrance. He gets nervous because, again, she looks just like the picture in the article, and she's looking everywhere but him, and when he finally does say hello to her, she shuts him down immediately, as she should. She reveals that she heard him in the library and that she does not want to speak to him, not now, not ever, and sashays away, joining Chet and Mr. Baker's convo about perpetual motion. Perpetual motion? Here Bryce was dying inside and they were talking about perpetual motion? He's so dramatic. He's just like me. He's just like me for real. I'm so... Like I said, this is the part in the film where he starts giving off Avar energy, because that's crazy. Perpetual motion. Here I was dying inside and they were talking about perpetual motion. Dramatic ass. He tries to explain to Julie that he knew what Garrett said wasn't right and that he wanted to punch him, and she calls him a coward for just laughing and agreeing, and proceeds not to look at him for the rest of the night, even though they're sat directly across from each other. The dinner is painfully awkward, mainly because of Mr. Losky. And Bryce feels icky watching his father chum it up with Mr. Baker after talking so much shit about him and his family. He calls it downright disgusting, which it is. And he says it feels like he's watching his father lie, which, again, it basically is. Mr. Losky makes a rude comment about the sycamore tree. He makes a rude comment about Chet helping Julie out and tries to play it off as a joke. And he makes a rude comment about Julie's brothers. In the book, he literally calls them piss poor to their faces. We find out that Mr. Losky peaked in high school. Who was surprised? Raise your hand if you're surprised. We also find out that Mr. Losky used to be in a band, but it didn't go anywhere because he probably sucked ass. In the book, Lynetta ends up playing one of their songs for everyone, and Mr. Losky gets weirdly intense about it, grilling them on how they were able to afford it and being so passive-aggressive about it. Meanwhile, the boys approach him with nothing but respect, but that big-headed bitch on the right had the craziest attitude. They even invite him to come play with them, and you can just tell how bitter he is about them being able to follow their dreams. The rest of the night goes well enough, and when the Bakers leave, Julie even apologizes to Bryce for being so aggro with him. She's a better girl than me, because I'm petty as fuck, alright? I would not have felt bad about it at all. He ends up feeling worse after the apology, because he feels like he isn't even important enough to hold a grudge against anymore. As the Loskys are cleaning up, Mrs. Losky is complimenting the brothers, and Mr. Losky responds by accusing them of doing illegal activities to be able to afford to make the demo. In the film, he accuses them of stealing, and Lynn calls him an asshole, but in the book, he accuses them of drug dealing, and Lynetta reads him to filth, saying, I happen to know for a fact that they don't use or deal. Where do you get off saying something like that? You are such a two-faced, condescending, narrow-minded jackass.
You are a disgusting, old, hot-headed, chauvinistic, alcoholic, bigot.
And how does this piece of shit respond? By slapping his daughter in the face. And Mrs. Losky gets in his face, getting him away from Lynn, who leaves the house, rightfully so. And Chet has to stop Bryce from getting into his face as well, sending him to his room instead. And while Bryce is in bed, he thinks about how his father always looked down on the Bakers, but after the dinner, he realizes that they were actually just a really cool and real family. He thinks about how Julie called him a coward, and he starts to think that his father might be one too. While Julie is getting ready for the dinner party, she finds herself staring at the painting and getting angry at Bryce all over again. She stands up finally and starts to realize Bryce has always been sort of shitty to her, to be completely honest. He didn't stick with her from the tree, he tossed her eggs, and now he was making fun of her at her uncle's expense. She gets so angry that she decides that she doesn't want to go, but then changes her mind because her mom had worked hard to prepare these beautiful pies, and she's just very excited all around. They arrive, she tells Bryce off, and she joins the perpetual motion conversation to try to get Bryce out of her mind. Right before dinner, he tries to apologize, but again, she snaps at him. During dinner, she starts to feel bad about snapping mid-apology because she thinks it's rude. Since we've already seen the dinner party, I'll just go through a few of the things from her perspective quickly. She realizes that Bryce does look a lot like his father, which is something she hadn't noticed before. We find out that she's low-key scared of Lynetta. While Lynn is playing Matt and Mark's song, Julie watches her parents and realizes that they are very proud of her brother's musical exploits, and this surprises her because her father had never really been big on them pursuing music, but she pieces together that the reason he is so proud is because of how hard they worked to be able to pursue the dream and how serious they are about it. It kind of trips her out that they'd been living across the street from the Loskys for all those years, and yet they were all pretty much complete strangers except for Chet. From her perspective, everyone has a nice time, I guess, and she has no leftover feelings of anger or attachment toward Bryce, and she makes that apology. When the Bakers get home, we finally get a nice scene with Matt and Mark that is completely cut out of the film. They talk about how much Mr. Losky was grilling them, and Mr. Baker commends them for keeping a level head. And the boys tell him how glad they are that he's their father, and he even tears up a bit. But Julie ends the night in a happy mood, which is good for her because she definitely deserves it. This next scene is only in the book. It's pretty brief, but it sets up something for later. The morning after the dinner, Julie is cleaning up after her hens, and Mrs. Stubby, the next door neighbor Julie sells her eggs to, peeks over the fence and tries to convince Julie to get a rooster so she can encourage her hens to lay more eggs. She also mentions a running tab that she promises to pay Julie by the end of the week. Y'all, this next chapter is the second to last chapter of the book, so I think it's only appropriate that it has the same title as the second chapter of the book. This is flipped from Bryce's point of view. Julie starts being nice to him at school, which bothers him. He says he would rather have her be mad at him than nice to him because then it wouldn't feel like they were just like total strangers. And even worse, Bryce finds out that he's a basket boy. Basically what that means is they're being presented in front of the student body and sold to the highest bidder. I'm sorry, but when and where was this ever normal? What is going on? Why are we selling young boys to the highest bidder? Anyways, the auction is thrown by the Boosters Club, whatever that is, to raise money for the school. The elected boys have to prepare a little informational like fun fact card about themselves and a picnic style lunch, hence the name Basket Boy. Garrett tells Bryce that Sherry Stalls broke up with her boyfriend to bid on him, and her and another girl called Melanie Humes are rumored to be getting into a bidding war over him. In the book, there's a third girl in the mix called Jumbo Jenny.
I wonder why it's not in the movie. Jumbo Jenny is crazy.
And as someone who was probably called something similar behind my back in middle school, I feel for you, girl, and I hear you and I see you, and I'm so glad that you didn't make it into the movie so your character wasn't subjected to more of this torment. Thankfully, they completely write her out. and we are not subjected to this poor girl's bullying. Okay. On the day of the auction, right before it starts, Garrett runs into the auditorium and tells Bryce that he saw Julie counting a big wad of cash by her locker that morning. This only happens in the movie. This doesn't happen in the book. Bryce doesn't know that Julie has money going into the auction. This information sends Bryce spiraling. What if she did bid on him? What if she got in a bidding war with Sherry and Melanie and lost out? Whole time he's stressing out about this, he's not paying attention, the auction flies by, and all of a sudden, it's Eddie Trulock's turn. Eddie Trulock is the boy right before him in the auction, so this means Bryce is on deck. Okay, and he's in his head, he's like, oh my gosh, Julie, Julie, Julie. All of a sudden, he hears a voice from the crowd. $8. Sold to Julie Baker for $8. Oh my god. Oh my god.
She should have just popped both of them.
I'm pegging that man in the back of the bus. Julie bidding on Eddie?
How could she bid on Eddie Trulock?
8 going twice.
How could she bid on anyone?
In the film, she's the only bidder, but in the book, she's like in a bit of a bidding war between another girl, but she wins out in the end, obviously. Bryce is so shaken to his core that he can't even move. He's frozen on the stage. He gets called up and he doesn't move. Hello? He starts wondering if Julie likes Eddie and if that's why she's been so nice to him at school, because she's completely over him now. Eventually he gets up there and the bidding starts before the fuck-ass lady auctioneer can even finish reading off his card. Sherry starts the bidding, and in the movie, she beats out Melanie with a bid of $50.
$50,000.
In the book, Jenny almost wins with a bid of $100. But Sherry and Melanie pull their money together and outbid her with $122.50. In both, Bryce's final bid is an all-time record at the school. So just to reiterate, on the book, he's on a triple date with Sherry and Melanie, and then in the movie, he's just on a date with Sherry. The entire lunch date, Bryce is miserable because all Sherry/Melanie want to talk about are summer vacations, tans, and the lunch Bryce prepared. But it's hard for Bryce to focus because less than 20 feet away from him was Julie.
My Julie, with Eddie Trulock. She's laughing.
What was she laughing about?
How could she sit there and laugh and look so beautiful?
Oh my god. It's crazy because I'm literally 20 years old and no one has ever said anything like that about me. No, I'm not bitter. Why would you even think that? Why would you even say something like that? He's so obsessed that he even asked the girls if they could talk about perpetual motion. And the girls are like, perpetual what? In the movie, this alone is enough to get him to walk over to Julie and literally pull her away from the conversation that she's having with Eddie. In the book, the girls get into a fight.
Stop the violence.
And he takes the commotion as an opportunity to go to Julie and pull her away from the lunch date. In both, he's walking away from his date and interrupting Julie's. In the book, he asks her if she likes Eddie, and when she says no, he leans in and tries to kiss her. And in the film, he doesn't even ask. He just immediately grabs her shoulders and tries to kiss her. In front of everybody. Oh my god. And Julie breaks away from him before he can land the kiss. Damn, Bryce, you didn't even make it to first base. Hey Bryce, I'll kiss you.
Nice job, makeout artist.
Hello, lover boy.
There's a really cute bonus feature on the DVD talking about the BTS of the scene, and I remember watching this for the first time as a kid and being so shook that Callan, Bryce's actor, had an Australian accent.
I know.
No.
Because I did not understand the concept of faking an accent at the time.
We don't actually kiss. It's a near kiss. I try to kiss her and then she runs out. And I was kind of confused when I read that because, she kind of wanted the kiss the entire time. And then when I try to kiss her, she runs off.
The actors talk about how they could not keep serious when they were filming the scene and were just very giggly overall.
When he grabs me and he goes like, and then I have to run away. But we kept laughing. It was so funny. Oh my gosh. It was so hard to keep a straight face. It was so embarrassing.
Just turn around.
No.
Julie, can we talk?
What's going on?
God.
Oh, God, here we go.
Then Madeline was trying to not laugh.
Why are you smiling?
It just seems like all the kids had a lot of fun filming this scene, and it's very wholesome and cute.
He told Madeline and I that my look when I was trying to kiss her was like,
Show him your face.
Bryce, you didn't even make it to first base.
Hey, Bryce, I'll kiss you.
Nice job, makeout artist.
Hello, lover boy.
At one point, Rob is messing with them and is like, okay, Callan, now I want you to actually kiss her.
My face drained. I'm just like, and I looked at Cal and I'm like, what?
And it's all very silly, but yeah, I thought I'd mention that because it's just a cute little bonus feature. Do you remember bonus features? Guys, like if you remember bonus features. Comment down below your favorite bonus feature. Let's get back to the actual story now. Okay, in the book, it's actually crazy because they both stay until the end of the lunch. They just go back to their seats and they stay in that room while all the other kids in the room are staring and talking about them. But fuck that, because in the film, she runs away and Bryce runs after her and she just ignores him and leaves on her bike as she should. Garrett runs after Bryce and they get into an argument that I also unfortunately know by heart. What's the matter with you? Leave me alone, Garrett. You get a date with the finest girl on campus and you blow it for Julie. You wouldn't understand. I completely don't understand. We're talking about Julie Baker here, the know-it-all neighbor, the nightmare nuisance, the coop poop babe. Shut up! What's the matter with you? Have you flipped? You know what? If you're gonna be this way, I don't need the association. Well, good, because neither do I. Yeah, neither do I. Was that cringe?
No.
No. Bryce ends up walking home alone, but he can't help but think that Garrett was right.
I had flipped. Completely.
They said the thing. Oh my god. He said the thing. He tries knocking on her door and calling her house and even going around to knock on her bedroom window. But it's no use. He has to find a way to make it up to her. This is where his point of view ends in the movie. But I really wish they included this last scene because it's so good. Bryce gets home in a panic and Chet is like, why the hell have you been running back and forth between here and the Bakers? Because she won't talk to me. Who? Julie. Why not? Because I literally tried to kiss her in front of all of our classmates. You did? What? You did? You tried to kiss her? And I just know Chet is feeling like world-renowned matchmaker Catherine Song-Covey right now.
I know when two people are meant for each other.
Bryce explains that ever since he actually sat down and read the article, he's been feeling weird. Julie doesn't look the same to him. She doesn't sound the same to him. She might as well be a completely different person. She's just different. And Chet says a line that I really, really like and really wish it was in the film. He says, "No, Bryce. She's still the same as she's always been. You're the one who's changed. And son, from here on out, you'll never be the same again." Chills. The Monday after the dinner party, while Julie is on her way into the school, Dana stops her and points out Bryce's name on the basket boy list. There he is, number 9, your main dish. Julie denies this, and Dana tells her that that's probably a good thing because rumor has it Sherry has already staken her claim on him. This obviously bothers Julie because she does not like Sherry. In the movie, I am pretty sure that the 20 boys are just picked at random. But in the book, we actually see a scene where they have to vote in Basket Boys. We see that Julie wrote Eddie's name down out of pure necessity. Every student has to write down 5 names, and she doesn't think that anyone else would vote for him. Then the list is posted, and we get the whole main dish scene, and more importantly, we see that Eddie made it onto the list. That week, she finds herself obsessing over the auction, and she can feel herself begin to backslide about Bryce. So the morning of the auction, she decides to leave her egg money at home. So even that if she does decide she wants to bid on him, she can't. This plan is squandered by Mrs. Stubbe, who stops her on the way to school to pay back her tab. Julie tries to refuse, but Mrs. Stubbe insists. So Julie just decides to pretend not to have it, but I have to giggle because this is such a non-problem. All Julie had to do was turn around and ride the 30 feet back to her house to put the money in the egg can. Like, look behind her. The garage is literally wide open, and she's already facing the direction of the house. But whatever, she brings the money to the school and counts it at her locker, and that's what Garrett sees. Right before the auction, Sherry confronts her, and apparently there's a rumor going that Julie is planning to bid on Bryce. Julie again denies this and goes to take her seat next to Dana, but when Bryce walks out onto stage with that suit and tie, her head starts spinning again. Once it gets to Eddie, no one is bidding on him, and she feels bad because she voted him in. She hatches a plan where Dana pretends to bid on him so that it looks like he actually has bidders, which is really nice of them. Julie wins and goes on the date. The date starts off awkward, but they get to talking, and just when Julie is starting to enjoy herself, here comes Bryce, pulling her away. When he goes in to kiss her, everything goes into slow-mo. He was trying to kiss her in front of everybody. All her life she'd been waiting for that kiss, but not now, not like this. In the book, when she goes back to sit next to Eddie, it's incredibly awkward because, like I said, everyone is staring and whispering, and Bryce keeps getting up and trying to talk to her. Like I said, in Bryce's perspective, she rides home on her bike, and when she gets home, she runs into the house crying and explains the situation to her mother. In the book, they have a conversation. Julie reveals that the Loskys know about Daniel because she told Chet about it, and Mrs. Baker already knows about this. Apparently, Mrs. Losky has been going over a lot to speak to her about how, like Julie, she's realizing this person she thought she loved for years is not who she thought he was.
And another reason I wish they put it in is because this is the last that we hear from the Loskys in the book. But in the movie, the last thing that we see of the Loskys is Mr. Losky, like, abusing Lynetta. Like, we don't get any closure from that. It just, like, never updates them again after that in the movie. And so, like, why not add this little piece of info? Like, I feel like it's kind of crucial. I don't know.
In the film, it just cuts to the last line of this conversation where Mrs. Baker tries to convince Julie to talk to Bryce and see what's going on, but Julie needs a bit more time to think. But this time is being constantly interrupted by Bryce, who, like I said earlier, keeps knocking, calling, and sneaking over. After a few days, Bryce stops, and Julie is relieved, thinking that it's finally over. But one day, she goes out to the living room to do some reading and sees Bryce with a shovel digging a hole in the middle of her grass. She's obviously upset, but Mr. Baker says that he gave Bryce permission, stressing her further.
Permission? Permission for what? He's digging a hole.
I told him he could.
But why?
Even worse, Bryce knows she's there, and he just nods at her and carries on with his digging. When he's done, he leaves for a moment, then comes back with a tree, a sycamore tree sapling that he plops right into the hole. Okay, let's talk about the book ending first because I think the movie's ending is a million times better and I want to save that for last. She lets him plant the tree and he leaves. She sits on the couch staring at it for a few hours. She imagines that in the future another girl will climb the tree and see the same views she did and that it'll change her life in the same way that her tree changed hers. Bryce occasionally watches and waves from his window, and after a while, she waves back. She thinks maybe she should go over there and thank him for the tree. After all, they've never really talked in the years that they knew each other. And maybe it's about time to meet him in a proper light. The movie does this so much better that if I were lying down right now, I would literally be giggling and kicking my feet up in the air. Okay, so when Julie sees the tree, she immediately clocks that it's a sycamore tree.
I could tell from the shape of the leaves, from the texture of the trunk. It was a sycamore tree.
And smiles, like her immediate mood shift. It was just like is it a sycamore tree? Oh my God. She walks out to go help him. And when she does, it switches back to Bryce's point of view. And he says, she walked out, I thought to myself, how could anyone have ever wanted to run away from Julie Baker?
He looked at me with those eyes. Those once again dazzling eyes. And I knew that Bryce Losky was still walking around with my first kiss.
But he wouldn't be for long. She asks him if he needs help, and together they plant the sapling. And as they're patting down the dirt, Bryce goes to hold her hand. And the film ends with them starting up their first real conversation while the song Let It Be Me by the Everly Brothers plays them out, which is very cute because Julie actually talks about the Everly Brothers earlier in the film. It's literally the perfect ending, and Rob Reiner ate that shit up. I can't stop smiling just thinking about it. It's everything to me. So yeah, that was the diabolical story of Flipped. Now, all in all, I would say that when comparing the film to the movie, that I enjoy the film more. I think that all the problems I had in the book were solved when put into the film. Like I said before, I think Bryce is a million times more likable in the film, way less misogynistic and awful. My Queen Julie is pretty much the same, but it's okay because she's actually likable in the book. There are obviously a few things in the book I wish they had included in the film, but I get it, you know, runtime limits and all that jazz. The film is just such a comfort movie for me. I don't think I'll ever get sick of it. I've watched it so many times at this point, I basically have it memorized by heart. It's just such a special story to me, and I'm glad to have been able to sit here and talk about it. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know if you can tell, but this is actually my first YouTube video up on this channel. So if you watch to this point and like it, consider liking and subscribing. I don't know. Hey, I already have a few videos lined up, and it would mean the world to me.
And I know what you're thinking, okay? This bitch took 3 months to edit one YouTube video. I'm sorry. And I promise it doesn't normally take me this long to edit things, okay? I'm just lazy. And to prove to you that I have videos lined up, look. Boom. Poison Apple book recaps coming soon, alright? Notes, pages and pages of notes about these things. Promise. Have faith.
Again, thank you for watching. Now get out of my room.